11 hours and 45 minutes prior to outbreak. John's feet were wet. It was dark. He tried to remember where he was. Had he passed out in the kiddie pool again? Water was running over his shoulder. Hey, there's a steering wheel. Okay, so he was in a vehicle of some kind. He couldn't see shit out the windshield, feet freezing. Something racing past the glass. Bubbles? John's knees were getting cold now. He reached down and dunked his hand in water and thought, oh shit, I am underwater here. Jesus, oh Jesus. His head was all muddled and he started slapping stupidly around the unfamiliar console. He turned the windshield wipers on. No effect. More bursts of bubbles flew past the windshield as his precious air escaped through 100 cracks in a craft not made to be submerged. My air, John thought crazily. That is my air leaving. Belatedly, he realized the water soaking his left arm was pouring in from the partly open window next to him. He turned toward the door and took a faceful of wet turkey. John shoved it aside and clutched at the door handle. He kicked at the door. It felt like somebody had stacked 2 tons of sand on the other side. He pushed with both feet and was shocked when more freezing water came raining in. Truck filling fast. Submerged to his chest now, the cold water like needles in every muscle. John was hyperventilating, crazily trying to pull the door closed again to keep the water out. 5 seconds later, he was sucking air out of a tiny gap at the roof of the truck, slurping metallic-tasting stagnant water with each breath. And then, silence. Blinking, underwater, frozen from head to toe. For the first time since he emerged from the womb, John wanted to take a breath and was not allowed. My last air. Holy shit, I have tasted the last air of my life. The air that is in my lungs is the last air I will ever get. This is bullshit, man. Suddenly, there was open water to his left. The door that had been impossible to push open moments ago, having gently drifted open on its own. A huge bundle of connected drowned turkeys floated there. John lunged towards the door, found to his horror that he was glued in place and decided once and for all that this had to be a nightmare. Seatbelt. You still have your seatbelt on, you stupid bastard. His fingers were numb in the chilled water, making the task of freeing himself almost impossible. So dark. John realized he was seeing only by the dashboard lights, which were still on somehow. He mashed the seatbelt clasp and after an eternity felt the belt loosen. He was so thrilled by this that he celebrated by releasing all of the air he had been holding in his mouth. John watched his life run away from him in a swarm of silver bubbles. No, come back, my last air. Come back, air. John frantically swam after his bubbles, shoving dead turkeys aside. Water in his nostrils, burning. The bubbles didn't float up, but rather flew off to his left. The assholes. He chased them. He had to get the air back. Seeing lights. Brain shutting down? John swam after the bubbles and toward the lights. Then he broke through the surface of the water. He blinked water out of his eyes and saw streetlights above him. He looked back and saw a pair of red taillights, only a couple of feet under the water, like the eyes of a lurking sea monster. The water was only about 8 feet deep, and he had only been about 5 seconds away from drowning in it. Jesus. John sloshed through the water, climbing the embankment and clawing at weeds to pull himself up, as red and blue lights twirled their way toward him from the highway. Now they show up. An hour later, John found himself in handcuffs in the back of a squad car. He'd been totally unsuccessful in his attempts to impress upon the police that they needed to rope off everything in a 10-mile radius and set it on fire. He was equally unsuccessful in getting any of the cops to loan him a cell phone. His wouldn't turn on, and in fact, there was still quite a bit of water dripping out of it. He needed to get in touch with Dave. Another car pulled up. Not a cop car, a flashy silver sports car. A dude in plain clothes got out, flashed a badge, and talked to the cops. Finally they got the fancy police on the case. Now they'd get something done. The fancy policeman eventually came over to John's squad car and pulled open the door. "You're John, right?" John said, "Listen to me. You guys need to get to David Wong's house." John told him the address. "Frankie is still alive. He's mobile, and he's got shit crawling out of him. He's full of turkey now, and I think he's going to Dave's place next." "Now, why don't you just calm down for a moment? I take it you've been drinking tonight?" "No more than usual. We're wasting time." "Who brought you out here?" "I drove myself. I thought I'd find Frankie here, and I did." "What did you drive?" "My Cadillac." "Well, it's not here. You sure you didn't come with your friend David? You two are the monster guys, right? With the website and all that?" "Listen to me. I think David is at his house, and if Frankie is heading there, you want to get there first." "Uh-huh. Because you think Frankie will hurt Dave. Because he has shit crawling out of him." "I thought you said you had heard of us, dude. If you don't get over there and fast, Frankie is the one that's in danger." 6 hours prior to outbreak. I woke up in my bathroom, startled. I had nodded off while pooping. Long goddamn day. 3 in the morning now. I tried to call John, got his voicemail, which was typical. John had set up his life perfectly so he could get in touch with me anytime he needed something, but all of my calls to him were carefully screened. Everything always on his terms. I stumbled through the house, knowing that going to bed while it was still dark was out of the question, but at a loss as to what to do otherwise. The laptop was still on the bed, so I went to CNN's website and found the video clip of the report with the security camera footage. The walking shadow floating down the hall. 3 other people visible in the frame, none looking at the shadow or reacting in any way. Just as Frankie didn't react when the alien bug thing was right in front of him. Invisible. I moved the slider on the website's video player back and forth. Rewind, play, rewind, play. A black ghost floating down a hospital hallway. And nobody notices. Forget it. This is ridiculous. I closed the laptop. I threw on a jacket and stuffed the flashlight in one flare in an inside pocket. By the time I got to the front door, Molly was at my knee, wagging her tail, sensing adventure. Together, we strode into the night. We walked 6 blocks to the late-night burrito stand. I leaned against a wall and ate from a wad of aluminum foil, occasionally grabbing chunks of chorizo and tossing them to Molly, who hurriedly swallowed each so she could immediately beg for another. There was a bottle of red Mountain Dew at my feet. I glanced at my watch. Still more than 3 hours to kill until sunrise. I wrapped up the remaining half burrito and tossed it into the trash can. Molly watched this act of wastefulness with an expression like she had just seen her entire family die in a fire. I mopped orange grease off my hands with a half-dozen napkins. At this hour, there were 5 other people eating at the tables in front of the burrito window. This establishment's entire business model was catching the drunks who were pushed out of the bars when they closed at 2. There was a pair of couples that looked college age, all 4 of them drunk off their asses, celebrating the fact that they would be young and pretty forever and ever. Then there was a short, fat guy off by himself in a biker jacket. I found his Harley behind him in the parking lot. I wondered what his story was. Maybe he's riding across the country and we'll be in Ohio by this time tomorrow. I wondered which of the 5 were Batmen and what their secrets were. You couldn't tell by looking. That was the point. Molly and I were shuffling back toward my house when I noticed there was a silver Porsche parked on my street. To say that was unusual is a ridiculous understatement. This was white trash lane. One house without a front door, another sealed shut with yellow police tape. My little bungalow had my 1998 Ford Bronco parked in the front. Sitting in the driveways of the next 3 houses was a 1985 Pontiac Fiero, a 95 Geo Tracker, and a 2004 PT Cruiser Woody. At least my property taxes were low. The Porsche was crouched low along the gravel shoulder in front of the doorless house I thought was abandoned, 3 doors down from mine. The gleaming machine looked like it had been warped here right off a showroom floor. Even the tires looked scrubbed down to a pure layer of factory rubber. I made it to the house and scanned around the yard. Nothing unusual. I was going to have to clean those gutters soon. The gigantic tree back there was dying and dropped every leaf by the first week of October. The leaves were ankle deep, but I knew they'd eventually blow into my neighbor's yard. The old guy who lived there seemed to like doing yard work, so I think that worked out for everybody. I let the dog poop in the backyard and let myself in the back door. I passed into the living room, and there was some freaking guy sitting there. He sat in my tattered recliner, making himself right at home. Probably 40 or so years old, dark hair with a little gray at the temples, about 3 days' growth of beard stubble that followed an angular jawline. He had a chin butt. He wore a leather jacket that had been over a black button shirt and sat open at the collar with the top 3 buttons undone. He wore jeans and cowboy boots, legs crossed casually. He looked like he had been clipped out of a catalog, and I immediately knew this was the owner of the Porsche. I said, "Hey, I think you wandered into the wrong house, buddy." He did exactly what I knew he was going to do, which is reach into an inside pocket and pull out a little leather ID wallet. He flipped it open. "Good morning, Mr. Wong. I'm Detective Lance Falconer. You and we're going to have a little talk." 5 hours prior to outbreak. Molly went right to the stranger in my living room. He scratched her behind the ears. Then she curled up at his feet. "Pretty dog. How long have you had her?" I hesitated, thinking at first this question was some kind of trap. He was a cop, after all. Then I decided that was silly and that he was just trying to be polite. Then I realized his being polite was itself a method of getting me relaxed and accustomed to answering his questions, and that, in fact, it was part of a trap. "She's my girlfriend's dog. She likes to bite people in the crotch out of nowhere. You know it's almost 4 a.m. Lance Falconer glanced over at a framed picture on top of my television. It was a picture of me, looking chubby and pale, and my hair looking like it was being blown around in a hurricane, standing behind Amy with my arms wrapped around her, looking over her mop of red hair under my chin. She wore sunglasses and a huge smile. I wore the expression of a man worried that a stranger was about to steal my camera. "That your girl?" "Yeah, we're engaged." "She live here?" "She's away at school, learning to be a programmer. Look, what's this about? Can I ask what happened to her hand? I gotta give it to him. The guy was good. Amy's normal right hand was visible in the picture, holding a $5 stuffed elephant she had won at a carnival game using only $36 worth of tickets. Her left arm hung down almost out of frame. But, if you were observant, down at the very edge of the photo, you could see a little sliver of blue sky where the arm ended at the wrist. She lost it in a car accident years ago. Did you go to see her? Is that where you've been tonight? No. Where'd you go? Burrito stand. Look, what did you do? Break in? Door was unlocked. I had reason to think you had been the victim of a violent crime, so I let myself in. I'm pretty sure you can't do that, detective. I'll give you a phone number where you can call to complain. I have my own entry on the voicemail tree. Your friend had some concern that maybe Frankie Burgess had come after you. You know, the guy who attacked 20 people at the hospital yesterday. Then, I asked the local cops if anybody had talked to you yet, and was surprised to find that nobody had. In fact, around the police station, any mention of your name just yields awkward silence. Well, as you can see, I'm fine. That door you came in works as an exit, too. A moment of your time, please. You understand we're in the middle of the biggest manhunt the state has ever seen. I don't see a whole lot of chance Frankie is still drawing breath, but you can imagine why we'd like to find him and put everybody's fears to rest. Why aren't you helping out then? I had to make sure he wasn't here, didn't I? Well, you're free to have a look around. Thank you, I did. He was here, wasn't he? Yesterday? Yeah. Right before he started shooting and biting people at the hospital. Just minutes before, in fact. Yeah. And was he acting strange at all? I could feel my face getting hot, the heat radiating up from my jawbone, starting to feel cornered. Maybe you should have said Frankie was never here. No, he wasn't ranting or anything. He didn't say much. He was responding to a call from a neighbor saying you were making lots of noise and screaming. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't all that. There was a thing in my house. It woke me up. Bit me. A thing? I think it was a squirrel or a raccoon or something. When Officer Burgess left here, he seemed normal. Yeah, like I said, just told me to be careful. He was more worried about me than anything. And you and your friend John didn't drive Frankie to the hospital? Because 8 witnesses saw you, and they got you on a security camera. And your friend talked to a member of the staff, saying Frankie had some kind of seizure. And he talked to a news crew, on camera, and said that Frankie was infected with a tiny alien parasite. Oh, right. John is, weird, you know? Drug problem. But you say Frankie seemed normal when he left. I mean, he was normal when he walked out. It was out by his car. He started having problems. We loaded him in his car and drove him to the hospital. And nothing led up to the seizure? No strange behavior? No tics or spasms or words not making sense? No, he seemed fine. You know, he didn't seem like he was on drugs or anything. What was in his throat? I was taken aback. I'd been looking around the room, avoiding the detective's eyes. But when he said that, my attention snapped right to him. He noticed. What do you mean? Your friend, John. He told the staff to check Frank's throat. Oh, yeah. I don't know. When he started having a seizure, or whatever it was, he started grabbing at his throat, like he was choking. Had he been eating something? No. Smoking a big cigar, maybe? Got surprised and swallowed it? Maybe he had a wad of chewing tobacco? I don't know. We were just trying to help. What are you hiding? Nothing. I almost screamed it. I gathered myself and said, I'm just freaked out about this thing like everybody. And now you're here accusing me and I had nothing to do with it. Have you heard of the Leonard farmhand case? No. Wait, was that the guy that was kidnapping women and performing surgery on them in his basement up in Chicago? That's right. Well, I caught farmhand. He had an IQ of 175, but I caught him. And do you know why? Because I got in the same room with him. That's all it took. See, I have an internal bullshit sensor that has yet to be beaten. And every time you open your mouth, Wong, all the lights start blinking red and smoke starts whistling out. Falconer rose from the chair. He was a good 4 inches taller than me, though part of that was the cowboy boot. He continued. Here's my theory. As it stands right now, I think you knew Frankie somehow before all this. You and your friend. And I think you had something to do with his going apeshit. Well, that's your opinion, I said lamely. Seriously, Frankie and I didn't know each other. I hadn't seen him in 6 or 7 years, probably since high school. And how exactly do you think I went about driving Frankie crazy? Mind control? That's right. Have fun connecting these dots, asshole. Stick your hand in this hole, and you'll draw back a bloody stump. Maybe he wasn't a friend. Maybe he was a fan. I don't have fans, detective. I work at a video store. John does. He has a band. Ask him. I did. I've been asking him things for a couple hours now. So, you guys believe this town is haunted? I sighed. No. Really? You and John don't talk about this? Because he's full of crazy stories. Yeah, we're not crazy. I'm not. Anyway. What's Zyprexa? What? You have it in your medicine cabinet. Oh, yeah. That was nothing. Just stress. I'm seeing somebody about it. And that guy you shot with a bow and arrow because you thought he was a monster? A crossbow. It was a misunderstanding. The guys down at the station, hearing them talk about you and your friend, they think you're in some kind of cult. They say 3 neighbors moved away in the last year alone because they were scared of you. You were the last guy to see Frankie before his episode, and everybody had some bullshit excuse for why you hadn't been interviewed yet. Like they're scared of you. People are stupid. You know, at the hospital, Frankie tore out an old woman's throat with his teeth. I felt myself take an unconscious step back toward the door. This guy was breathing all my air. Is that right? That's terrible. He was also heard speaking another language. I didn't answer. So here's my theory, Wong. My theory is that last night wasn't Frankie's first visit out here. I think he's a part of your little cult following. And I think you and your friends scrambled his brain, probably slipped him a drug and told him it'd give him magic powers or whatever it is that you're into. And I think he hurt a whole bunch of people because of it. Look, you claim to have a top-notch bullshit detector, and you let that theory come out of your mouth? That a couple of local dumbasses have mind control powers? I kind of want you to charge me with that. The trial would be hilarious. He showed me the most unsettling smile I've ever seen and said, I've enjoyed this conversation. I mean that. You've given me what I love most. A puzzle. See, I get bored real easy. Most cases put me to sleep. Everybody knows who it is. The rest is just a grind, trying to fill a file cabinet with evidence for the prosecutor to take to trial. But now, I'm like a kid a week before Christmas, rattling gifts under the tree to find out what's inside. I just rattled yours and, boy, there's something cool in there. He opened the front door. A business card appeared in his hand. Call me if you decide you want to talk more about this and save us both some time. Otherwise, I'll be seeing you around. When I heard the Porsche growl past the house 10 minutes later, I was still standing in my living room, staring at the door the detective had passed through. I was sweating like a bottle of beer at the beach. I dug out my phone, dialed John. Fucking voicemail. 2 hours prior to outbreak. It wasn't the longest night of my life, but it was way up there. I've had my share of terrified, sleepless nights, and I've developed a pretty good survival system involving nothing more than mental alertness exercises, positive thinking, and amphetamines. Don't worry, I have a prescription. Or at least the guy who sold them to me did. I was in for a brutal crash later, but that was Day David's problem. Night David was trying to stay alive. And it worked. I was out on my porch when shafts of light started burning through the trees in my front yard, and I almost cried at the sight of it. It was the first time I could remember that I had seen 2 consecutive sunrises. Ironically, at that point, I was too jacked up to sleep, and not just from the orange capsules that were dissolving in my system. I had come up with a plan of action during my long wait. First, get the shit out of my tool shed and dump it somewhere, maybe in the river. Then, get out of town for a while. Let all this blow over. Where would I go? Didn't matter. I couldn't do anything. Hitchhike to San Francisco and live on the beach. Join the circus. The where wasn't important. I had been in a rut. That's what I realized. I needed to shake things up. Lose this weight. Learn karate. Wait, did I accidentally take 4 of those pills instead of 2? Wow. It seemed like a good time for a shower. My laundry basket was still overturned. I lifted it up a few inches and stuffed all the clothes I was wearing under there. I made my way into the bathroom. Molly barked. She was staring at the door and I heard a car pull up. I heard Credence, and a look through the curtains revealed John's old Cadillac. Thank Christ. Footsteps on the porch. I yelled, "Don't open the door yet. I'm naked. Give me a minute." The door opened behind me. I turned and was face to face with Frankie Burgess. Frankie opened his mouth. A thin stream of liquid squirted out as a greeting. I had the thought to throw up an arm to shield my face from whatever it was, but before the muscles could twitch into action, there was a bang and a bluish flash. I felt the floor hit me in the back. I stared at the ceiling, ears ringing, vaguely realizing that the stuff Frankie spat had combusted in midair with enough force to knock me on my ass. I blinked, dazed. Frankie stepped over me. He was carrying what looked like several red and white grocery bags in each arm. He went into the bedroom. From the floor, I saw the Cadillac outside my open front door and had time to make the conscious decision to race out there and drive naked across America before I felt the forearm close around my neck. Frankie, now with the strength of several Frankies, yanked me to my feet and marched me toward the bedroom. Molly barked. She bounded toward us, past us, out the door, into the yard, into the distance, barking the whole way. She was not going to get help. I could see into the bedroom now, but couldn't make sense of what was there. There were 4 huge, white, bleeding dead birds on my bed. Chickens? Turkeys? I was trying to puzzle through the situation. Were these birds for me? Like a gift? Or an offering? They were laid out and dripping blood on my sheets, like some Aztec sacrifice on an altar. I said, thank you for the turkeys, Frankie. Is your name still Frankie? Shut up. Frankie's voice was muffled, like he was talking around a mouthful of food. He held me in place, both of us watching the bed intently for... what? Frankie's arm, the broken one, felt weird. Something long and dry snaking around my torso. I didn't look down. Movement on my bed. The sheet was rippling, like somebody had poked their fingers up from under the mattress and was wiggling them. Several somebodies. Dozens of fingers. I heard fabric rip. A slit formed in the sheet, and a tiny version of one of those spiders, no more than 2 inches long, crawled out. It went right for the nearest turkey. It was quickly joined by another, and another. Within seconds, my bed was writhing with dozens of the spider larvae, like maggots on a slab of meat. With every ounce of strength and adrenaline and terror I could muster, I twisted out of Frankie's grasp and spun towards the door. I made it into the living room before Frankie tackled me. I twisted around and, from a position flat on my back, punched him in the face as hard as I could. It felt like I broke my hand. He shrugged it off and pinned my arms, his legs straddling my chest. I looked right into his eyes and saw the gaping stare of a terrified young man. He was hissing something at me, a whisper from deep in the throat. He leaned his face down close to mine. I couldn't make out his words. They were just choking sounds like an old man on a respirator. He leaned closer. I could smell his breath. "They are everywhere," he hissed. "Do you understand me? They are everywhere. Frankie, can you hear me? Get off me. Then I saw it. When Frankie opened his mouth, I was looking at the spider. Its tongue, where Frankie's tongue used to be, behind his teeth. It had simply taken over the lower half of his skull. I pictured the way its leg was able to glue itself to my shoulder and shuddered. The spider was a part of Frankie now. Maybe the spider was Frankie at this point. Running footsteps on the porch. Frankie and I both looked and saw John hurl himself through the front door. I screamed, "John, it's a breeder." John didn't stop. He hurdled the coffee table while screaming, "Your key! I need your shed key!" Shed key? What was he doing? Borrowing my lawnmower? "Listen," Frankie hissed, focusing back on me. I realized he was trying to talk through his parasite and struggling to do it. "They're everywhere. It could be anyone. Do you get it? Anyone." Frankie screamed. A long, segmented thing came out from his mouth, out from the parasite hiding within. It looked like a black earthworm, but longer, with a little spike on the end like on a scorpion's tail. I was expecting the thing to come down and sting me or something. Instead, it curled up toward Frankie's own eye. Frankie screamed again. The worm thing plunged into his eyeball. I heard a small engine rev to life from outside the house. I had the crazy thought that I'd see John racing around the house with my lawnmower screaming, "Thanks for letting me borrow this," before throwing it in his car and driving off. Blood dripped down on me from Frankie's punctured eye. His hands found their way to my face and throat, clawing at me mindlessly. Fingers trying to pry open my mouth. The engine sound was in the house now, deafening. A shadow fell over us. John. Something in his hands. Something loud. The engine sound revved to a mechanical scream, then bogged down as with effort. There was a sound like carrots in a blender. Wetness rained down on me. The blurred metal teeth of a chainsaw ripped through Frankie's neck. John worked the machine down, rocking it back and forth as it tore through spine and muscle and tendons, his hands streaked with red. Frankie's head fell free from his shoulders, his wet hair bonking me in the face. The rest of his body held itself above me for a few seconds, then pounded down on me with dead weight that knocked the air from my lungs. The saw shut off and I could hear John yelling questions at me. His hand appeared on Frankie's shoulder, and together, we rolled the corpse off me. I sprang to my feet, looked down at my body in disgust. I looked like an infant somebody had inexplicably taken to all-you-can-eat rib night. John said, You all right?" I sprinted to the bedroom door and slammed it shut. I struggled to catch my breath and said, "My bedroom. It's infested with baby versions of those spider things. They're all over my bed, eating turkey. My bed, John. They were in my bed. Larva, this whole time. We gotta do something." "Did they eat your clothes?" "Listen, the army has quarantined the hospital, but it's not doing any good because the spiders are out. They're here. Here, John. What are we going to do if we let just one of those things out into the world?" "Okay, first of all, wait, where's the head?" We both looked down at Frankie's headless corpse, now laying in the living room on a spreading pool of blood. There was no head. "What the?" Look, shit. Frankie's head was making a run for it. The spider's legs were protruding from the severed neck, and they were scurrying to head through the open front door. I ran, following the crawling head out onto the porch. I stomped on the head with my bare foot, pinning it to the welcome mat. I started to yell to John to get the chainsaw when the asshole head bit my foot. I yanked the foot free of Frankie's teeth, then reared back with my other foot and kicked the head so hard I felt like I broke 4 toes. The head sailed 10 feet through the air until it bounced off the windshield of Detective Lance Falconer's Porsche, which had chosen that moment to pull into the driveway. The head left a pink smear on his windshield, then rolled off his hood and back at my feet. I grabbed it in both hands, teeth facing away from me so it couldn't bite my dick off. A hugely confused Falconer emerged from the car to the sight of me standing naked in my driveway, covered in blood, and covering my crotch with a severed head. Hi, I'm David Wong, and I'm here with a special message about amphetamines. Put it down. Falconer's gun was out. I said, 1 minute. I ran back inside, made it to the bedroom, opened the door, threw the head inside, and slammed the door shut again. My brief glimpse of the room revealed the hatchlings had made it halfway across the floor. I ran into the bedroom, grabbed 2 towels, and stuffed them under the door. That wouldn't hold long. Asshole, put your hands up now. Falconer had come inside, gun still trained on me. I said, okay, calm down. There's good news and bad news. The good news is we found Frankie. The bad news is we've got bigger problems. Wait, interjected John from behind the detective. You're Lance Falconer. Shut up or I will shoot you in the face. That was driving me nuts all night. You're the detective who caught that Father's Day killer, right? Didn't you throw him out of a helicopter? Falconer didn't answer. John said to me, he's famous. I saw this whole thing about him on A&E. Shut the fuck up. Did you kill Frankie? John said, it was self-defense, and he stole my car. He drove it here, and I had to walk all the way from the police station. Got here just in time. He was raping Dave when I walked in. He wasn't... Shut up, both of you. You're coming with me. To me, he said, put some fucking pants on. Fuck you. This is my house. I make the rules. You take your clothes off. John, get the twister mat. Falconer asked, are you high? A little. What's in the room? Why are you sealing it up? John, thinking quickly, said, infection. Frankie had it. It's the reason they quarantined the hospital. It's like a virus that... Stop. You're lying. To me, he said, what's in the room? Look, I respect your bullshit detector. Everything that I'm about to say is true. Read it in my eyes. There are factors at work here that you would not understand, and that we do not have time to explain. There's nothing more you can do here, detective, other than get out of our way. You came here to find a man. You found him. He's lying at your feet. Now go home. Falconer gave me a hard look. He lowered his gun, strode past me, and threw open the bedroom door. His eyes went right to the bed. What he saw were 4 bloody turkeys. No, that wasn't right. What he saw were 4 bloody turkey skeletons laying on my bed among piles of feathers. The larvae had all but stripped them clean within minutes. What I saw but Falconer did not, was that the spiders were now in the carpet, on the walls, and crawling around the glass of the bedroom window. They were growing at an impossible rate, some already the size of a fist. I felt a single drop of sweat fall down the back of my neck, trickling down my spine. I took a reflexive step back. One of the spiders crawled across Falconer's shoe. He wouldn't have noticed if he'd been looking directly at it. What is that in there? Some kind of ritual? Voodoo bullshit? Trying to summon a ghost or demon or whatever you guys do? No, I told you, Detective, you're not going to solve this one. Sure, I understand. He holstered his gun. Then, in a blur, he grabbed my arm, spun me around, and slammed me against the doorframe of the bedroom. He caught my right arm up behind my back, and pain exploded down my shoulder joint, the ligaments twisting around the bone. I screamed. To John, Falconer shouted, "Back!" Cold steel on my right wrist. Handcuffs. Falconer pushed me into the bedroom. He shoved me to my knees among the newborn spiders. I heard John shout, "No, no!" But Falconer spun and put his gun on him. With his free hand, he looped the handcuff chain around the metal frame of the bed and snapped the remaining cuff around my other wrist. I was on my bare knees, hands chained around the bed, and I could feel itchy spider legs crawling up one of my thighs, over my feet. Falconer stood, held his gun on John, and said, "Now, I'm not unlocking that until you've explained everything." 100 minutes prior to outbreak. Amy peed a lot when she got tense. A nervous bladder and a 3-hour-long bus ride don't make for a great combination, but worrying wasn't something she could just turn off. Her roommate at school had taught her some Tai Chi, but that wasn't the sort of thing you could do on a bus without being asked to leave. She couldn't get David or John on the phone, and that was weird. Really weird. David always picks up unless he was in the shower or his phone was dead, but she had been trying since early in the morning. And John, free spirit that he was, had Amy on his list of must-answer calls. He knew she didn't call him unless it was a big deal, or she couldn't raise David. She never abused this privilege. David had sounded so ominous the night before, getting in one of his moods where he thinks the whole world depends on him and that he's about to let everybody down. It was Amy's job to take his mind off it when he got like that, and it usually wasn't all that hard. He was a guy, after all. A guy with a thing for red underpants. But nothing was helping this time, and Amy was once again frustrated by the distance. David needed her, and there were things you just couldn't do over the phone or a webcam. The school was only 130 miles away, but she didn't drive, and quite frankly, David couldn't afford to make the trip. Not just because of the $60 in gas he burned every time, but the time missed at work. That's why she had bought a Greyhound ticket within 5 minutes of getting off the phone with him the day before. From the window seat on the bus, she dialed him again. With her phone to her ear, she stared out at the trees zipping by, imagining a little running man out there trying to keep up with the bus, jumping over obstacles as they flew past. 4 rings, then voicemail. Again. She tried hard not to be clingy. She had been on the other end of that with her last boyfriend, a guy who had never touched a girl before and therefore thought if she was cut open, a gush of rainbows and unicorns would spill out. Calling 5 times a day, showing up unannounced, kind of acting like one of those sleazy photographers who followed celebrities everywhere. It was no fun, and David, more than most people, demanded distance. He was the type to reflexively push other people away, never figuring out that the gnawing feeling inside of him is what the rest of us call loneliness. You have to ease people out of that. It takes time. But with David's history, she had earned the right to assume the worst when she didn't hear from him. It had come to the worst more than once. She felt her bladder swelling. Where was her body getting the liquid from? She hadn't drank anything since breakfast. She wondered how long it was until the next rest stop. The bus had a bathroom, but it was gross. Really gross, like on a medical level. It looked like it hadn't been cleaned since the Bush administration, and there were probably things crawling on that toilet seat that she didn't want anywhere near her private parts. 90 minutes prior to outbreak. Alien spiders crawled towards my balls. I felt one on my neck and shook it off with a shrug. I thought I had another one in my hair. One got into my armpit and I crushed it against my ribs with my bicep. I tried to squash them with my knees. Falconer must have thought I was having a seizure. John tried to construct an argument to dissuade Falconer, saying, shit, fuck, detective. No, this is bad. Trying to control my voice, I said, listen, Frankie had something inside him that took over his brain. It laid eggs. They hatched. They're in here. I paused to shake off a spider on my ear, like a dog flinging off water after a bath. They're crawling around, but you can't see them. Because they're invisible, right? Yes, they... One of them bit my ear. I squished it off with my shoulder. Something crashed behind me. There was a scuffle and grunts. I looked back and saw John had gone after Falconer. Falconer threw him off, hitting him hard in the nose with an elbow. He pointed his gun at John's face. You're fucking crazy, both of you. What did you give him? What drug did you give Frankie? God damn it, we're going in circles. They had him in the hospital long enough to get blood. They said so on the news. Did tests show anything? Anything at all? So, you understand my confusion. A spider crawled up my neck over my chin. It tried to push its way into my mouth, and I spat and tried to wipe it off by rubbing my face on the bedspread. I couldn't dislodge it. Its tiny legs pushed it past my lips. I bit it. I cut it in half with my front teeth and ground it up with my molars, spitting and gagging on an intense salt taste that made my whole body convulse. One of the spiders crawled off the bed, across the handcuff chain, and onto the underside of my forearm. I started to scrape it off, then stopped. I twisted my body around to face Falconer and said, "Look, at my arm. Watch." "I don't see any..." "No, I know you don't. Yet. Wait. Just wait. One of those things, they're like little spiders or bugs. It's sitting right there. It's going to start eating soon. And I'm pretty sure you'll see..." Gah! I hissed in a breath and clenched my teeth. The inch-long larva bit down with its tiny mandibles and ripped up a chunk of my skin. Holding it with its two front legs, it started munching on me. A second later, it repeated the process, tearing with its mandibles, ripping up a tiny patch of tissue, eating. And again. I pressed my eyes shut, trying to block out the pain. The itching of tiny legs on my feet and calves and thighs and ass and back. Tried to escape, to block out the fact that I was being eaten alive by arachnids. For some reason, the only thing I could replace it with was the image of being eaten by tiny clowns. Man, I'm not even sure those were amphetamines. I opened my eyes and the expression on Falconer's face almost made the whole thing worth it. From his point of view, a strip of skin the width of a pencil was spontaneously vanishing from my arm, leaving a trench of blood and pink fat behind. What did he think? That I had a flesh-eating virus? that John and I were faking the whole thing with horror movie makeup as part of an elaborate and gruesome prank? I said, if you leave me here, by this afternoon, I'll look like those turkeys up there. Wet, red bones. They're all over me. And I see at least 3 of them on your pants. There's one on the sleeve of your jacket. If we don't exterminate these fuckers somehow, they'll breed, and they'll be everywhere, and nobody will be able to stop them, because nobody else can see them. He lowered his gun. Detective, only the 3 of us in this room understand what's happening here. Ugh. I growled as the bug took another bite. Hungry little bastard. And only we can stop it. And if you don't help us, then it's just me and John. And we're just a couple of dildos. Please unlock these goddamn handcuffs. Falconer thought about it for what seemed like a day and a half, but was probably just a few seconds. He dug in his jacket pocket for a tiny set of keys, tossed them to John, and nodded in my direction. Instead of unlocking the handcuffs, John said, "Hold still," then grabbed a nearby shoe and started slapping my arm with it. Ow! God damn it! The baby spider fell off and John ground it into the carpet with his foot. He went to work on the cuffs with a tiny key and was able to unlock them after only 137 or so tries. I hurriedly grabbed some khaki pants and a t-shirt I found draped over a nearby chair and flew from the room. We slammed the door and crammed the towels under the gap once more. John squashed half a dozen bugs that had escaped into the hall and cleaned off the ones we found crawling on Falconer. I yanked on the clothes and kept right on walking out the front door. With all of us standing in the yard, John said to me, "All right, get everything you care about out of this house. I'll get my lighter. Do you know what your insurance policy says about intentional fires?" Falconer said, "Shut up. Don't do anything. Just let me think." He dug a phone from his pocket. "I'm going to let you in on a secret. The whole world is not against you. We've got help in this town. Pros who actually get paid to worry about public safety. I've got a Fed hotline number they gave us. I dial it and describe what I've seen here, and they'll have this place surrounded and locked down in 10 minutes. I'll tell them what you told me, and we'll all figure it out like professionals. I'm telling you, there's a whole non-white trash world out there, fellas." Studying the ragged gouge in my forearm, I said, "You still don't, fully understand the situation, Detective. There's a reason we didn't just do that from the start. There are, let's just say, some powerful people who not only know what's going on in this town, but kind of get off on it. What we're saying," added John, "is that the whole world is in fact against us." I said, "But either way, I'm going to go gather up my stuff. I'm obviously not staying in this infested shithole." To John, "You got room in your trunk, right?" "Yep." "How about we go up to the burrito stand after this?" I was 5 seconds away from saying the same thing. Falconer returned his attention to his phone call. He was still alert, though. I got the feeling the man was alert when he was fast asleep. This would be a delicate operation. Studying the floor for any signs of wiggling, I hurried through the house and returned to the yard with my laptop, a garbage bag full of clothes I pulled from the dryer, and a mostly full bottle of Grey Goose I found in the freezer. I grabbed a half-full bag of dog food from the kitchen, in case Molly showed up again. I declared my packing finished and started to leave, then felt like slapping myself when I realized what I had almost forgotten. On the wall of my living room was the one contribution Amy had made to the decor. A velvet Jesus painting that looked like it had been copied from an airbrush job on the back of a van, in the dark. It had belonged to her parents, who had probably bought it off some roadside stand in New Mexico. Amy's parents were gone, however, and this terrible painting was one of the only things she'd kept from their old house. I grabbed it off the wall and took one last look around. The rest of my stuff could pretty much go. Outside, Falconer was putting away his phone, and I said to him, "Come around back. I need to show you something." In the tool shed. "What is it?" "Well, I don't know what it is. That's the point. I think you need to see it before the feds get here, though." To John, I said, "Can you put my stuff in your trunk? I want to show him the box." John dug out his keys and started unlocking his trunk. I led Falconer around the yard to the still open shed. I gestured toward the green box on the gravel floor, at those weird hieroglyphic symbols across the front. "Pretty weird, huh?" "Found it." "And?" "It can't be opened. Not by you and not by me. We've only had it open once, and what's in there is weird as shit." "Okay, well, I'll show it to the feds when they get here." From the shelf, Elmo said, 8 inches erect! But I'm not clear how this is relevant to... Falconer stopped. Probably because, like me, he smelled smoke. He gave me a look that would have made Cancer apologize, then ran like hell. Falconer rounded the house in time to see John emerge from the front door with his lighter, a Vietnam-era flamethrower he had bought off eBay. Completely legal, by the way. Behind him, flames were turning the rest of my worldly possessions into smoke and ash. Falconer clenched his jaw and said, "Oh, you stupid white trash fucks. What have you done?" I said, "We've taken care of the problem is what we've done. Same as always. There was nothing for the cops to do here, or the National Guard, or anybody else." Sirens rose up in the background. I've got to say, nobody reacts faster than the fire department. Falconer grabbed me, spun me around, and for the second time, slapped on handcuffs. I could not have cared less. I felt relief for the first time in 2 days. All-consuming flames roared through the infested house, and the whole ordeal was finally over. Frankie and the spider larva would burn, and there would be no outbreak. 10 minutes prior to outbreak. Falconer's Porsche sat so low to the ground that I had to squat to get into it. The interior smelled like the leather shop at a mall. I saw I had dragged somebody leaves from outside onto the spotless carpet, and I felt like I had desecrated it. How could you drive a car like this without going crazy with worry? How could you eat a burrito in this thing? You'd be in constant fear of squirting refried beans everywhere. I have no idea how he afforded such a car, and I thought it would be impolite to ask. Maybe he sold drugs on the side. I sat awkwardly, the handcuffs digging into my lower back. I could see my bedroom window from where the Porsche was parked, orange flames licking up behind the glass, eating the curtains. On the sidewalk in front of the Porsche sat John, another set of handcuffs holding his hands behind his back. Actually, he got those white plastic zip-tie cuffs. I got the metal ones. So clearly, Falconer recognized me as the more dangerous suspect. John was watching my house burn to the ground as a dozen firefighters rolled out hoses from the 2 trucks. It was strangely serene. If this whole ordeal had been a movie, this would play under the credits. But Falconer was pissed. He was moving from one fireman to the next, flashing his badge and shouting for them to back off. They were doing no such thing. I had gathered from Munch, John's friend, bandmate, and part-time fireman, that neither cops nor firefighters take kindly to the other group telling them how to do their jobs. This was a fire. They were firefighters. And by God, They were going to put that shit out. Neighbors were gathering. House fires are already good entertainment in a neighborhood like this, where the primary forms of recreation are drinking alcohol and inventing excuses to keep the unemployment benefits coming. But the address made this one a bigger deal. They knew who lived here. Everyone had heard the rumors. I saw 2 people filming the scene with their phones. Another fire truck pulled up and one of the crew went up to John. I recognized Munch Lombard in his firefighting garb, his neck tattoos making him look less like a fireman and more like the lead singer in a novelty rap metal band with a firefighter theme, maybe named something like Fahrenheit 187. The 2 men were having a surprisingly casual conversation, considering one of them was sitting on the ground in handcuffs, and behind the other was a raging inferno, slowly transmitting a bungalow into the atmosphere via a thick column of black smoke. Water arced into the air from one of the hoses. My bedroom window exploded and fingers of fire clawed at the siding, leaving blackened marks behind. Falconer was on his phone again. More rubberneckers showed up. None of it mattered. At the end of the day, all that happened was Frankie had a bad encounter with something nasty, something undisclosed. One of the risks of the job in this town. Some people got hurt, but now Frankie was dead, and the nasty things inside him were disintegrating in a 1,200-degree house-sized blast furnace. As for Detective Lance Falconer, well, he was good and pissed. Probably because his evidence was going up in smoke with it. He'd probably push to get John and me charged with 24 crimes. Everything from obstructing a police investigation to public nudity. Let him. It'd come to nothing. The chief knew what town he worked in. Sure, he'd put somebody on the case, then come back a month later and tell the prosecutor there's not enough to take to court. Then it'd all quietly go away. Again. I'd been through all this before. Nobody wants what goes on in this town to get out. They'll sweep it under the rug. Just like the incident with the pizza delivery guy. I take a few hours of mandated counseling, and in exchange, I don't tell people what's really going on and start a panic. I watched flames dance in every window in front of me. The house burning down wasn't even that big of a deal in my life. I could stay at John's place until I found an apartment or trailer somewhere. Besides, I still owned the hunk of land the house was about to fertilize with its ashes. Could sell that for a couple $1,000 at least, right? See? Everything would be fine. My eyes slipped closed. So little sleep in those 30-plus hours since the bed spider showed up. My phone screamed from my jacket pocket. That had to be Amy, since the only other person who ever called me was sitting on the sidewalk with his hands cuffed behind his back, as were mine. So the phone would just have to ring. Something caught my attention outside. Just around the corner from the bedroom, a firefighter was on the ground, laying face down in the grass. I was about to yell at one of the firemen standing around to go help, but another guy was already heading over there. He got his companion up on his knees, but he was clutching his throat. Probably just swallowed some smoke, or ate something too fast. Nobody else was coming to help because out front, things were getting complicated. A city cop car got there first, making a total of 6 vehicles parked along the street, including my truck and John's caddy. An RV with a square blue logo on the side trailed right behind it. What I assumed was from the feds Falconer mentioned. I guessed the Center for Disease Control. I suddenly realized how much inconvenience this whole thing had caused a lot of people. Out from the RV filed guys in those white spacesuits they use to protect themselves from germs, with the hood and the big clear plastic faceplate. They kind of stood around aimlessly when they saw that the structure they were supposed to quarantine was in fact going up in flames, was being attended to by firefighters, and was surrounded by a crowd of 24 gawking Midwesterners. Some of the spacesuit guys approached the firemen, and were almost certainly explaining why they couldn't remain on the scene unless they got some of those suits of their own, since there was an unknown flesh-eating biological pathogen on site, and the place was under quarantine. The firefighters were presumably pointing out that they didn't have any of those suits on hand, and they couldn't leave because, the fire still wasn't out. Then Falconer and the 2 local cops joined the conversation, presumably to explain that, oh, by the way, this was also a crime scene. What with the dead headless cop, arson, and willful destruction of evidence. Behind them, a Humvee rolled up, and the street in front of my house was now a goddamn stationary parade. Out stepped an officer from the National Guard, who I guessed was the guy put in charge of the manhunt for Frankie, who appeared to loudly be asserting that this was his show since roasting behind those walls was the man he had been charged with finding. Behind them, a white Channel 5 News van pulled up, shitting a cameraman from the rear doors before the wheels even stopped turning. Meanwhile, the crowd of bystanders was doubling every 5 minutes, as text messages flew furiously through the air to announce that the coolest freaking thing ever was going down at the old Wong place right this very minute. The whole situation was devolving into what John would later refer to as a fucktard circus. I shifted my gaze back behind the house. Uh-oh. The fireman was flat again, his protective hat laying a few feet away. His friend, nowhere to be found. Maybe he went for help. Suddenly, several things hit me at once. One, that the fireman was missing his head. Two, the fact that the hat that was laying a few feet away still had the head in it. 3, the realization that this was not the body of the guy who was hurt earlier. This was the guy who came to help. 4, a fist which smashed through the window and knocked me out cold. When I came to a few seconds later, I was being dragged through the glass and people were screaming. I landed with a thud on the grass outside the Porsche. A pair of arms coated in the black sleeves of a firefighter's coat were clenched around my chest, dragging me across my lawn. Something was clasped in one of those hands, red and white and shaped like a horseshoe. My vision came into focus enough for me to realize it was a human jawbone, complete with a full set of teeth. One of the molars had a silver filling in it. With each passing foot, things got a little warmer and a little smokier, which my bell-rung brain finally realized meant I was being dragged toward the fire. I thrashed to get out of the man's grip, my hands still pinned behind me in handcuffs. The burst of panic-fueled strength got me free, for the moment, anyway, and I tried to crawl away from him. A boot came down on my back. I fought and managed to roll over. The fireman, a huge, strapping guy, was missing the lower half of his face. Where his jawbone should have been, and presumably had been all of his life until a few minutes ago, was the mouth and a dozen black wiggling feet of my spider. It looked a bit charred in places. Half-faced firefighter threw off his fireman's jacket. He lifted his right arm, and 2 thin, sharp, white protrusions emerged from his wrist. Kind of like Wolverine's claws, except when Wolverine pushed his out, his hand didn't immediately fall off. This happened here. From the wrist stump, the 2 protrusions grew and sharpened. Then, a red split appeared at the man's wrist, growing down to his elbow. With a wet, tearing sound, his forearm pulled itself into 2 lengthwise halves, the 2 bones of the forearm splitting apart like blades opening on a pair of scissors. Half-faced firefighter scissor arms brandished his new appendage and leaned down. His forehead exploded. Gunshots hammered the air, screams from all around. Half-faced bloody head stumbled back. It was Falconer, advancing behind his enormous chrome handgun. It fired again and again, shots punching bloody holes in a firefighter-issued t-shirt, but the man just would not go down. I was up and on my feet and running, off balance and stumbling with my hands pinned behind me. I heard Falconer let out a frustrated, growling scream. I spun and saw Half-Face grab the detective around the base of the skull. He forced Falconer's head down to waist level, then turned his body away from him. Holding Falconer's face directly in front of his buttocks, Half-Face farted. Falconer collapsed to the leaves, as if dead. Another gunshot smacked Half-Face in the shoulder. Annoyed, he held up his scissored arm. The two sharpened bones rotated at the elbow joint, slow at first, and then faster and faster, until they were twirling at the elbow like a bandleader's baton, whizzing through the air and throwing off flecks of blood and meat. Half-faced firefighter Bloodyhead Spinbones strode toward the burning house with purpose, directly toward my bedroom window, where a column of fire was rushing upward, causing the gutter above it to melt and sag like saltwater taffy. Starting from the foundation, he angled his spinning appendage into the wall, tearing a ragged hole in the siding and insulation behind it, making a sound like a jackhammer. He made a vertical gash about chest high, leading up to the bottom left corner of the broken window. Cops screamed commands around me. One was tending to Falconer. The other was shouting about backup. Half-Face finished his cut, then made another one a few feet to the right of it, again ending at the window. He was turning the window into a door. "Hey, Dave!" It was John. His plastic handcuffs were cut, but he still wore the loops around his wrist like a pair of cheap bracelets. Munch came running up behind him, looking panic-stricken. He was carrying a huge set of bolt cutters. "Turn around!" Half-Face bashed out the rest of the glass with his remaining fist. Then he reached through the window and pulled. A burning section of wall fell at his feet. Behind it was the charred, melting springs and frame that had been my bed. The flames roared, fueled by the new rush of oxygen. John took the bolt cutters from Munch and went to work on my handcuffs. To Munch, he screamed, "Run! Take Dave's Bronco. The keys are in it. Drive until you're someplace nobody speaks English." My hands were free. Explosions erupted a few feet away. A cop going to work on Half-Face with a riot gun. The monster was down on his knees. I saw a shot blow a hole in his neck and his head flopped over, dangling by a tendon. There was victory for about 3 seconds. Then, the cop started screaming. The cop next to him started screaming. The nearest firefighter started screaming. They were clawing and swatting and scraping at themselves, trying to knock away tiny biting monsters that they could not see. Then, I looked back at my house and understood. I just killed the world. Black wiggling shapes fanned out from the hole in the wall, spilling in waves over the broken boards and plaster on the lawn, disappearing into the grass. A firefighter ran up with a bullhorn, raised it, and shouted, "Warning, we have toxic fumes. Everyone, and I mean everyone, leave the area if you do not have breathing apparatus." A spider was eating his eyeball. A bystander, shooting that scene on his phone, had a baby spider on his hand and another in his hair. I couldn't breathe. This was not happening. This was not possibly happening. A hand on my elbow pulling me away. John saying something I couldn't hear. Everything was silent. My brain had frozen up. People were running. It all seemed very familiar. John was pulling me along. I caught the eyes of Detective Falconer, who was back up, now trying ineffectually to help a heavy teenage girl get the spider off of her neck. His look spoke clearly. "Take it all in, white trash. You did this." He was right. Before the fire, we had the parasites imprisoned inside the house. The feds could have roped it off, sealed it up, kept all the bystanders safely away. They could have taken their time figuring out how to neutralize the threat. We could have told them what we knew, told them not to get within 100 yards without mouth protection and to bury the house under a mountain of concrete. Instead, the fire had drawn a crowd. First, the firefighters with no protection, and then the gawkers who crowded around like a goddamn all-you-can-eat parasite buffet. They would all die. Maybe everyone would die. Maybe the parasites would own the planet. And it would all be my fault. It was the DVD sticker situation all over again. We ran. We bumped into CDC crews with holes chewed through their spacesuits. We shouldered past confused National Guardsmen. We dodged the Action 5 news camera guy and a lady reporter demanding an interview from someone. Anyone. We piled into the caddy. It stank of turkeys, possibly because there were 2 turkeys in the back seat. Live ones, pecking at the seat cushions. John cranked the ignition, and Creedence Clearwater Revival blared from the dash. He stepped on the gas, and we ripped through a band of yellow police tape somebody was trying to string up. Probably a little late for that, buddy. Outbreak.